Hey everyone, this is Brian Ferguson. I know if you're watching this that you're enjoying the Bumps and Thumps podcast. In order to continue the podcast and get the guests on that everyone wants to hear about, we need support from listeners like you. There are a few ways you can do this. One is going to anchor.fm, which will be on the bottom of your screen here, and click the support button. There you can make a monthly contribution to support the podcast. There's also, we have a Teespring store. We have a link down at the bottom of the screen as well for that. And we have products such as t-shirts like this one I'm wearing, backpacks, glassware, and other great items for you to purchase. Those purchases go directly back into the podcast and get on guests that require financial compensation. Thank you again for your support. Go to those websites and support our podcast, and we will continue to bring the guests that you want to hear about, past and present. And thank you for your support and enjoy the podcast. Thank you for joining another edition of Bumps and Thumps, the talk of wrestling. I'm Brian Ferguson. My guest today is an author, referee, and pro wrestling fan. He also created WrestleReunion and authored the book Bruno Sammartino, the Autobiography of Wrestling's Living Legend. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to introduce the Big Cheese, Mr. Sal Anthony Corrente. Sal, thanks for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Brian. You even pronounced my name right, so you get points right out of the gate for that.
I was in the Army for 26 years, so I had to pronounce a lot of challenging names, so I appreciate it. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit. You know, you wrote this book, but I want to get into a little bit your roots. So where you grew up, how you grew up. Tell us a little bit about that, if you would, please.
Well, I'm from Yonkers, New York. My parents were both born and raised there, and that's where they still are today. And we were just a middle-class family. My father was a cop for many, many years, but he also taught boxing and a lot of Golden Glove champions for the Police Athletic League. And he was also a singer, put out numerous records. They're all over YouTube from the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And
Wow.
The thing was, it was a very quiet life, just Little League and stuff like that, and started working jobs. And then a friend of mine named Anthony Attanasio started his own refrigerator business, which has since multiplied more times than I can count. But that was, and I worked for him for many years. And one day he told me he did a call at a guy's house. The guy's name was Dominic Marcello, and he, of course, lived in Yonkers as well. And he had all the pictures of the wrestlers. And I had been a fan for about a year or two, because I did not start watching wrestling as I was a kid like the rest of the kids in the neighborhood. I heard names like Bruno Sammartino, Ivan Putski, and Chief Jay Strongbow, but to be honest, that meant nothing to me. I didn't have any interest in trying to watch it or nothing. But Anthony had said that he talked to Dominic, told him about me, and he said he could bring me over the house. So I went to his house and saw all these pictures. The most exciting thing at the time was seeing the Grand Wizard without his stuff on.
Oh, yeah.
Never seen that before. And the more I talked to Dominic, I said, where do you get all these pictures? And he said, well, we go down to the TV tapings. I said, where are those things done? He said, Allentown, Pennsylvania. And I said, they never say that. They just say under the auspices of the State Athletic Commission, but they don't even say what state. So yeah. I had no idea it was Pennsylvania. So I said, well, how often do you go? And they said, well, they do it every 3 weeks. I said, can I go? And they said, sure, if you split expenses. I was 18, I had never been anywhere without my parents, never traveled. I had only really recently started driving. I was in no hurry to drive, didn't have to, so I really didn't want to do that. But I went with Dominic and another guy named Mike Diavanzo. And these guys, again, another guy from Yonkers. And these guys took pictures, not just at the TVs, but maybe the Garden, the Spectrum. And many people knew them from Paul Heyman on to just regular fans that would show up all the time. They knew these guys. They took good pictures and stuff, and they made money selling pictures on the side outside the arenas. Mm-hmm. Well, Eventually, well, really, to be honest with you, that first night we were there, they introduced me to a guy many wrestling fans know, Professor Elliot Marin. You see Elliot a lot of times at Madison Square Garden. Elliot was a very unique individual. We got to be friends, but he was an interesting cat for sure. But WWE had a lot of faith in him in those days because, he was the one that carried the tapes to New York City. I mean, literally the whole company was in his hands. And Elliot never drove a day in his life. He was famous, though, for being able to tell the boys how to get to any building they wanted to go to. He could just dictate the directions off the top of his head, even though he'd never driven a day. But let's face it, if he lost those tapes, he had big problems. And he had to get them from TV down to WOR. So that was also the night Buddy Rogers came back and started to do Rogers Corner. It was the first, that was my first foray there. And what happened after that? Oh, so I remember Rogers walking out. It was like kind of a big deal. And right away, they got me a job watching security in the back door. So that went on for a while, and I got to know the guys and et cetera. But then Afa and Sika, who had become very good friends with the Samoans, with Mike and Dominic, wrote and said that they were finishing up for Bill Watts, and they were going to be the team to replace Fuji and Saito. And so when those guys showed up over there, then they introduced me to them, and that really started the ball rolling. Got very close to Afa pretty quickly, and things just steamrolled from there. So my, activity in the business got to be much more. And then Afa started kind of teaching me the business, but not really in the ring. I did very little training for, there's many matches that I've had. I probably had less training than anybody who's ever put on a pair of tights.
Yeah. Wow. That's an interesting story. Wow. That's pretty, didn't grow up really watching it and then ended up getting involved in it like you did. So let's talk about, did some research. You did the referee bit for quite a while. Was it mainly in WWF, or was there other promotions you worked for?
Well, look, everything that's happened to me has kind of been an accident. To be honest with you, the only reason I even started watching wrestling is because the Mets were playing on the West Coast, I think against the Padres. Well, wrestling couldn't go on at midnight, so it went on at 5 o'clock. Normally, I'd have been asleep. But at 5 o'clock, I'm turning the channel. There's wrestling. There's really nothing else on. Remember those days when we had 5 channels?
I do.
So, and that's how I got involved. Now, the wrestling, the refereeing, Afa had taught me a lot about the business. But like I say, not so much in the ring, just the psychology of things. So I decided I want to be a referee. Well, getting on with the New York State Athletic Commission was very challenging. Very, very challenging. A lot of political nonsense that side shouldn't have been challenging, but it was. My father, even though he was a boxing guy, didn't really care for wrestling, but he did what he could to help me, and we knew people. And through friends of the family, I'm just being very honest, Senator Joe Pisani back in the day pretty much called down there and said, give this kid a license. And once he did that, I had the license in 5 minutes. Now, that was one thing to be licensed. It's another thing to get work.
Yeah.
So again, we beat the political drum. And, eventually when I was down there, they called me in the office and flat out said, a guy named P.D. Della, he said, what is it you're trying to prove? So I'm not trying to prove anything. I just want to work like everybody else. But in those days, the work was pretty much limited. A lot of work went to Jack Lotz, who's also from Yonkers. And anybody who watched shows in the Garden should know who Jack Lotz is. And then you had your Dick Crowles and Billy Caputo. Got to be very good friends with Billy Caputo, great guy, and so forth. So it was really hard. And they didn't even want to give me spot shows. But after enough noise was made down there and they chewed me out, then they gave me my bookings after that. Then, some guys, ended up taking a liking to me. A guy named Jerry Vitetta, who was promoting the NWA, called down there and got me in a big show at the Nassau Coliseum, and never did get to the actual Garden. I might have if I hadn't left New York, but ultimately in 1889, I started doing a lot of work with the NWA because of Nikita Koloff. Ivan introduced me to Nikita. We became good friends, and he went to J.J. Dillon, and it's all kind of crazy, to be honest with you. I did a lot of work in Puerto Rico. As a matter of fact, Zeus wrestled Abdullah the Butcher 3 times. You'll find that I am the only person who ever refereed that match. Twice in Puerto Rico and once in Imperial, California. They insisted they wanted Zeus on the show. and we had to figure out what could we do. So I said, well, look, I said, the only guy I know that can do this is Abdullah. So we called Abdullah, he came out, and, Zeus was pretty humble back in the day. And he was like, when we got in the dressing room, he's like, look, now I've worked with this guy before. And I said, well, I know, I was in the ring with you. And then he looked up and he saw who it was, and he felt much better because, this was not Zeus's thing. He did the best he could with the skills and the limited training that he had. But it was all just stuff that happened. Like Victor Quinones got me booked, and I ended up being a troubleshooting referee in Puerto Rico. And, I worked some pretty good matches down there. They named me referee of the year. Joel Goodhart, if anybody remembers that name from Philadelphia, they should. He did a lot of really great stuff. I was involved in one of the first, the vertical pins, that Falls Anywhere match. And we put up against the wall and counted the pin. I was one of the two referees. Joel wanted one of us on each side, and we counted the three. And I remember a question. I said, Joel, are you kidding with this? Because we got along really good. He said, no, it's false count anywhere. Let's just do it. So we did, and had a good time with that. But mostly I was running around with the Samoans and then getting help from some of these other guys. And then a guy named Rob Russin needed help on a tour. And I forget, somebody had bailed out on him. Oh, I guess Kamala had bailed out on the tour, and we needed to get a replacement. So we were looking around for replacements, and then Alpha, the Wild Samoan, ended up going on the tour. But then after that, Russin started booking me on stuff, and then we worked together for a long time also, including first guys to go back to Australia. And I don't know how chronological that all is, but, a lot of it was, again, just luck and being in the right place. Like I was in Philadelphia, and they were doing TV for the NWA. For whatever reason, Tommy Young wasn't there. Well, just flat out, they were not happy with the referees in Philadelphia.
Yeah.
One of the Murdoch brothers comes to me and says, listen, you better be on standby. They're going to the commission now and seeing if you could at least work the first hour. And I said, okay. And so they put me out there for the first hour. And what I was very proud of is, because Tony Schiavone didn't know me from anybody, and I don't even know if he remembered me today, but after the first hour, he came and found me and he said, listen, I want to know what your name is. I want to be sure to promote you on the next hour. So I felt he didn't do that because he thought I was making a mess out there.
Yeah, right.
Then they said, hey, listen, you're just going to do the second hour also. The other guys worked. They did the dark matches and so forth. But on that show, I got to be with Dusty and Bobby Eaton in the cage. That match is on YouTube. And, one of my prouder moments is coming around the corner and hearing Dusty say to Jim Crockett, if Sal wasn't here, we'd be dead. And,
wow.
I appreciated that because he certainly knew I was there. And Dusty gave me a lot of breaks, basically because of Nikita Koloff. And then, to really tie this thing up, JJ Dillon and I have become very close over the years. And he certainly took notice of me and started booking me in big towns with, where they were turning people away. Mm-hmm. And I made the connection until much later when I found out that JJ and Bruno were very close. JJ had started as a referee. Mm-hmm. Bruno helped him with no particular reason why. And when I started all coming together in my mind, I said, Bruno, I really think that everything you did for JJ, he tried to pass that on through me because he had no reason to help. Sure, okay, I went out and worked hard. A lot of people go out and work hard.
Yeah.
And I didn't even know Bruno at the time. I hadn't really met him yet and really gotten involved with him. So I didn't even know that JJ knew Bruno. That's how little that I knew about it at the time. But it all made sense to me, and we're still friends to this day. If you say you saw the book, you should see there's pictures of me, JJ, and Davey O'Hannon in the back eating at Bruno's favorite restaurant. I told him, get down here, we got to go.
Yeah.
And that was basically down for the wake and all.
Yeah, that's awesome. Nikita Koloff, I interviewed him on here. Oh, geez, it's probably been a year and a half, but one of the nicest guys I've ever talked to on here. Very humble, down to earth, and just a nice guy. And when he told me his story about getting into the business, I was pretty shocked because he had no training. He said he had nothing. Yeah. They just threw him in there, and to be able to do that with no training, is pretty remarkable. So,
well, did he tell you about how late he was on the second night and all that?
He may have. I
well, the way the story goes is Koloff and Kernodle, were riding with him, and he just was late. They were supposed to get down there, work out in the ring, blah, blah, blah. Crockett was incensed because, here's the guy, as you said, with no training. Doesn't matter how impressive he looks, right? Literally no training at all.
Right.
So Ivan calmed Jimmy down, but he said, I'm just telling you, if this guy trips going through the ropes, he said, sit it. Nikita Koloff's finished. But, Nikita was a natural born athlete anyway. Got through it. And then, of course, over time got some training. But let's face it, if you look at early matches in Nikita, I mean, some people are lucky their heads didn't get taken off.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever told this story, but I'm going to tell it now.
All right.
We were working for a guy in Tennessee. I was living with Nikita as his roommate by this time. He'd moved me down to Carolinas, got me a tryout with Nelson Royal, and I was Nelson Royal's head referee. I was booking a show for, I guess the guy's name was John Huey, I think, from up in Tennessee. And we called Manny Fernandez and told him he was going to work with Nikita in the main event. And to be honest with you, he wasn't too happy about it. But he agreed to do it. Everything was fine. But he hadn't seen or worked with Nikita in a long time. Well, they had a good crowd up there and a good house. And Nikita had really improved tremendously. And Manny pointed that out in the middle of the room. Something was said. And I think he looked at me and said, Sal, this guy's turned into one hell of a worker. Nikita said, you were always a great worker. And so I knew it was all good. But that had been the change that a technician like Manny, who really was fantastic in the ring. I know how and I never told Nikita he didn't want to work with him, right?
Yeah.
But by the time it was over, that it was because the last thing you need to start any more headaches. It's bad enough as it is. But it all worked out great.
Yeah. Yeah. That's an interesting story. Let's talk about what's one of your favorite matches that you did. You talked about Abdullah and Zeus. Is there any other matches? I know you did a lot of them, but the one that really just sticks out in your mind that you really enjoyed working?
Well, look, there's numerous reasons why matches stand out in your mind. And the Zeus and Abdullah thing, like I say, it was interesting, but it was tough. And again, we're working with a guy who it wasn't his thing. And Abdullah, I got to say, he put out way more effort than you can imagine. And the way the people went back and forth, we lost the people. The building was dead. Next thing you know, they're on the tips of their toes, screaming and yelling, and then they'd go dead again. And then it was kind of nuts. I guess one of the biggest matches that stands out to me really is Dusty and Bobby Eaton in the steel cage with Cornette outside. TV match, and I didn't even know if I was supposed to be in it. I thought it was beyond me. And I said, Dusty, am I supposed to be out there with you? He said, of course, it's on television. And that was not normal either. Steel cage match on television was for the US. So that was a big one. I guess, though, one of the prouder moments, and I wish this was filmed, but it wasn't. We were in Baltimore, and this is at the time where we were turning them away with the NWA. So Tommy Young comes and gets me, and we go on a meeting with Dusty, Barry Windham, Bigelow, and JJ Dillon. So Dusty says, Sal, you're going to be out there with me. He said, and Barry's going to knock you out. When he does, I want you to not move a muscle, just like Ronnie Garvin, just like I did for Ronnie Garvin. He said, you do not move a single muscle. Okay. So they were trying to figure out what they were going to knock me out with. And, I said, I got these brass knuckles here. And, I always carried them, tried to have enough available if needed. And they said, nah, that's no good. Well, 10 minutes later, it became good. So, I mean, it's one of these obvious things, right? It was so huge. I mean, if you couldn't see it from the last row, you better go get your eyes checked. So, but they used it, and Barry hit me. And due to some confusion, and believe me, to this day, it was 100% confusion. I got blamed for some stuff that really was on the wrestlers. It wasn't on me. And me and Tommy Young did not get along. Well, he didn't get along with me. I had no problem with him other than the fact that I took heat for something that I didn't do. Well, the bottom line is he had to come down there and revive me and make the count and all this other, and I had to change things back. And what basically happened is Tommy comes over and starts to revive me, and he said, Sal, that was one hell of a bump you took. Now, for a guy who doesn't like you to even say anything. So I figured that was a good deal. And it was one of those deals that, you just felt like everything was right. So that's another, it was in Baltimore. And I felt good about that. But to be honest with you, I was in so many good matches first time I refereed, even though me and Ricky Steamboat were good friends, I hadn't worked with him, so I got to work with him. And in a match where it was down in Sumter, South Carolina, and Paul Jones said, we were kind of worried because the guy he was working with, quite honestly, especially for that back in that day, he just terrible. I mean, he really did. And Paul Jones said, Sal, if this goes bad, just get it over with quick. This guy was probably the best worker on the whole show. Holy cow. So you just never know, looking. So him and Steamboat really had a good match. But yeah, it's really hard for different reasons. I always like working with a guy like Charlie Fulton, if you know that name. Mm-hmm. I mean, Charlie was one of the best there was, didn't get the credit he deserved, but he was fantastic. And of course, the Samoans are always fun, but I can't really think of anybody that I didn't really enjoy working with. I worked with the Powers of Pain and the Road Warriors once, and to be honest with you, just staying out of their way was an absolute miracle. I mean, these guys were young. Those NWA rings are smaller than the WWF rings. These guys are slamming each other all over the place. But the best thing about it is, because that was the first time I had worked with the Road Warriors. I mean, we got along, but that was the first time I'd worked with them. And when we came upstairs, Hawk went into his screaming mode and said, of course, I had no idea this was coming whatsoever. He says, "Hey, JJ." Well, at that point, you could hear a pin drop in the room, right? He says, "This kid's one hell of a referee." So, those are the kind of things that make you proud. When a guy like that silences the entire dressing room to make that speech instead of saying, "Hey, JJ, this kid's good," I guess another interesting one was out in Denver. I started to work with the Ganyas, but some things through confusion, me and Greg talk about it quite often now. He didn't really remember too much of it, but I think I've jarred his memory. But I had a bad reputation for no reason whatsoever. But it was a complete mistake, 100%. And anybody who knows me knew that. So I went to Jimmy Snook and I said, "Jimmy, look, I don't know what to do here, man." I said, "They won't let me work. They think I did this and that." And he said, "Go see Nick. Nick will fix the whole thing." So I went over and talked to Bachwinkle, who knew me. He went over and talked to Greg. He said, "Okay, everything's set. You try out tonight." He said, "They're going to put you in the first match. And everything should be okay." So I go out, I do the first match. Ganya's meeting me at the dressing room when I get back. And he said, "Listen, everything was great. Could you stay and do the main event?" So, I mean, I'm thinking I'm doing one match and, take my stuff off.
Right.
So I went to Colonel De Beers, who I got along with extremely well. And I said, "Hey, Ed, they said that I could stay and do your match." He said, "Of course they did. Me and Jimmy told them that there's no way the rest of these guys can do this. You have to stay and do it." It was a coal miner's glove match with a double glove.
Yes.
Yeah. And they couldn't take a chance on it being messed up. But the thing that stands out to me about it, I was very young, right? I didn't really understand everything at the time. Mm-hmm. We had the match. Everything went great. De Beers took out the second glove, knocked Snook out, and he gets pinned right in the middle. Of course, I never saw the second glove.
Right.
So when I get back, I said, "Hey, Nick, what'd you think?" I said, "The crowd reaction was kind of weird." He said, "Sal, let me tell you something. You were only seconds away from a riot out there." So what are you talking about? He said, "Did you hear that dead silence? They were all in shock that Snooker was beat." He said, "I'm telling you." And of course, it wasn't the fact that Snooker got beat. It was how he got beat. Blatant cheating. He said, "I'm telling you, you were seconds away from a riot." So I've never forgotten that, because that is when things go bad, right? Yeah. They weren't booing. You could literally hear a pin drop in the place. So those are some of the interesting matches that I've had over time.
You've had a very interesting career as a referee, it sounds like. I'm going to go back and watch some of those matches now and look for you, because
I don't look like I do now. I can tell you that.
That's okay. I don't either, my friend. I don't either. I didn't look like this back then. I can tell you that. Let's talk a little bit about you starting up the WrestleReunion.
Yeah.
that you did.
Well, you left out about 12 years in the middle somewhere. If you
Okay, well, let's talk about. Okay, so after you did some refereeing, what else did you do after that?
Well, that's when I was still doing the refereeing for Rob Russin and the booking.
Okay.
So the finishes, booking the talent, pretty much everything except selling the shows. That's what Rob Russin did.
Okay.
So I worked with a lot of people there. And then we booked a tour to Australia. Now, there had been no company back there since Jim Barnett.
Okay. Oh,
It
wow.
was a big deal. It was set up really well. It was at a place called Australia's Wonderland. We were going to be in the same building for 3 weeks, 2 shows a day, 30 minutes a show. Everything was booked. Kamala was the main event. And when it was all said and done, they decided they wanted Paul Orndorff. Now, I knew Paul very well, but I knew this was going to be big money. Ultimately, we booked him. The park didn't care. End of story. So, okay. So we go over there to Australia, and it's determined that I'm going to be, before we go, it's determined that I'm going to be Friday for Kamala. If you go and look and see Paul Orndorff, Kamala, Australia on YouTube, you'll see me, Paul, a girl named Debbie Levy, who was part of the crew over there, young girl, really nice young girl, and Kamala. You'll see me in the Friday outfit. And it's about a 1.5, 2-minute long clip, but it's cool. It was on Australia's version of Wide World of Sports. So that just goes to show you the publicity. We were on Good Morning Australia. Orndorff and Al Green and Mark Laurinaitis, the Terminators, they were all on a show called Hey, Hey, It's Saturday, which doesn't mean anything to you, but was a show in Australia for 25 years.
Wow.
They flew them over to Melbourne for that. Yeah, it was a big hit show.
Yeah.
And we did all kinds of stuff. So it was a real tour. So what I told Rob is, they haven't had wrestling here in a long time. Let's figure out how this is going to go. So we sent out the first match, which was maybe Cousin Luke against somebody. And Mouse finish, leg on the ropes. The pin is stopped. Next time, legs on the rope, the referee just counts. Well, the people literally lost their minds. I looked at Rob. I said, "This is going to be a breeze," and it was. We had good matches for the next 3 weeks, 2 hours a day. When Orndorff got in the ring the first time, I looked at him. I said, 2 minutes, Paul. He said, what? I said, 2 minutes. That's it. Because the deal was, you got 30 minutes to put on a show. Those people better be back out in the midway in the 31st minute. You know what I mean? It was 30 minutes of entertainment, back out in the midway. And, so that was a big deal. But that started my managing career.
Okay.
Working with Kamala. And of course, again, I knew nothing. Somewhere right after the match, James looks at me and he says, "You the sorriest Friday I ever seen in my life." Well, I was like, oh my God, I said, what did I do wrong? So we got in the back. I said, "James, look, I'm sorry. I don't, he said, what are you talking about?" And I said, "You said I was the sorriest." "Oh, I was just screwing with you, man. It's all good." But, at the time he said it, here I am, just the referee. Next thing you know, I'm out there managing him,
Yeah.
But it was a lot of fun. Australia was a great place at the time. You could have left me there for 20 years with the pay we were getting and the hotel and all these beautiful women chauffeurs taking us anywhere we wanted to go. It was all crazy.
Yeah. Wow.
So then I started wrestling and managing in the Carolinas when I came back. Worked a lot with a guy named Gorgeous Gary Royal, former NWA junior heavyweight champion. And even though I had enough training, Gary could literally work with him. Gary's another Charlie Fulton type, could just work with anybody, work around anybody. As a matter of fact, we were working one night and he said, just schoolboying me to beat me. I said, "Gary, I can't do that." He says, "Yes, you can." I said, "No, I can't, Gary." He said, "Sal, I'll do it to myself." Just sure enough, he did. That's the kind of guy that he was. "You just put your arm around my neck. I'll be in it." Okay. So I did a lot of that. Most of it was cartoon, especially when I was a heel. Most of it was cartoon type stuff.
Yeah.
More Lou Albano type of, just goofiness out there. That's what I grew up with, right? Lou was like, back in the day, I don't know where you're from, but back in the day, people wanted to kill Lou Albano.
Yeah.
Just literally kill him. Bruno told me about the first time he went out there and said, he's an embarrassment. Bruno's an embarrassment to the Italian people. I want to change my name to Lou Albin. And, people are just dirt. So yeah, that's what I obviously had limited skills, but we did fine. We entertained people, and that's really what it was about.
Yeah.
The best wrestler isn't always the most entertaining.
That's true. That's very true. All right. Well, let's talk about WrestleReunion. Let's talk about, how'd you come up with that?
Well, there had been some conventions going on with a decent amount of people and decent attendance, but I thought, all these guys can still work. What are they doing? I mean, they're just signing autographs and leaving. So I decided to put this concept together, and Rob Russin was going to help me with it. And we knew that it was going to be so big that credibility was going to be a problem. Even though a lot of people knew me, a lot of people didn't.
Right.
And so I called Bill Apter, and he said he was willing to stand up for me. And at the time, I was working and traveling 300 days a year.
Oh, wow.
So I called Diamond Dallas Page. I went to LA, met with Page, and he said, look, Sal, I mean, we'd worked together, of course, but he said, Sal, I don't know you that well. He said, but Rob does, and Rob says to back you, so that's what I'm going to do. So these guys put their names on it to say that it was all going to happen. And, that was the start. And then I just started putting matches together. Yeah. But it was not easy. It was calling people, and I was very upfront with everybody. This is what we're going to pay you. This is what we want you to do. Some people jumped on board right away. Others did not. Eventually, it got to a point where people were pissed off if they weren't booked, because the event was so big that it was almost more of an insult not to be included.
Yeah.
And that became a problem to some extent. But certain things like this gorgeous Gary Royal, who's a good friend of mine and a great worker, and I want him to be a part of this. So I said, well, who do you want to work with? He said, well, I'd love to work with Shawn Michaels again. He said, but since that's not possible, why don't you get Marty Jannetty? Because Gary was in Kansas City with Shawn and Marty both, and worked with these guys night after night after night when they first started out. So, I remember Jannetty walking in the building and seeing Jannetty probably had no idea what he was booked on whatsoever, right?
Yeah.
He walks into the building and he sees all these guys all over the place. Somebody must have pointed me out. I'm sure he didn't remember me. I'd worked with him and Rose and Summers. And you want to talk about great matches. Rose and Summers, Midnight Rockers, forget it. Yeah, absolutely amazing guys to work with. And plus, Sherry Martel was a good friend of mine too. So, that only helped. But even without it, it was just fantastic.
Yeah.
He said, can you tell me who I'm working with? I said, sure, Gary Royal. And he said, you mean the real Gary Royal? I said, yeah, the real one. And Gary came out later and he said, Marty came over to me and wanted to know how he got booked on this thing. I told him that, I requested him. And the funny thing about it, why it's an important story of WrestleReunion 1, these guys obviously knew each other, had worked together well into the double digits, maybe into the triple digits. And once they had that match, it wasn't long after that Jannetty was right back in the WWE. Now, of course, that didn't last long due to other issues, but he pretty much went straight from people saw what he did there. And, Pat Patterson, I invited Pat down because Pat gave me some breaks too, and booked me in Denver and so forth. It was on some shows with me, so he knew I could work. So he came down. I wanted him to sign autographs at the time. He wasn't doing that, but he said, I will come by. So I'm sure he made a full report to the office, and Jannetty, got back in there. Yeah. And, Bob Orton refused to wrestle. So that was a problem because I really wanted Bob to be there with Piper and the whole thing. And he said, Sal, look, I understand if it's a problem and you can't book me. He said, I get it. He said, I can come sign autographs, but that's it. So when I go out to Oregon to meet with Piper face to face to get this settled, and, the meeting was good. He said, look, I don't know what to say. And Piper had been on my first show. I promoted a show in Yonkers. And then we did the first, I guess we skipped over that. I promoted the first WrestleMania on closed circuit in Westchester County at the Westchester College. We did turnaway business there. And we had a spot show before that with Orndorff, Schultz, and Piper against Rocky Johnson, Tony Atlas, and S.D. Jones. That was also turnaway. So when I meet with Piper, he said, look, I don't know about this. He said, but listen to the guys you got on it. If they're willing to trust you, so am I. So we booked that. Then after that, I had lunch with Buddy Rose and Colonel De Beers. Told him what was going on. Told him I wanted Bob Orton to team with them, but Bob refused. And he said, listen, when you get home, call Bob. You tell him I said this. So I repeated what Buddy said. He started laughing. He said, okay, I'm going to do it for you. So next thing you know, Orton's in the 6-man. And shortly after that, he's back in the WWF too. So those guys went straight from there, pretty much straight back to the WWF. So, obviously what they did was good enough from a guy who didn't even want to put on the tights anymore. Next thing you know, he's back. He's back in WWF.
Wow.
But putting it together, the truth is, in retrospect, that there were probably too many guys on WrestleReunion 1. I've come to find out, certainly you need to have a good, solid card, but it can get so big that it just doesn't make sense anymore.
Yeah.
Because it's the point of diminishing return. Now, I was in Hollywood on the way to LAX, and Paige called. His roommate at the time was Stone Cold Steve Austin. He said, "Sal, what are you up to?" And I said, "Well, I'm heading to LAX. Time to head to the next town." And he said, "Well, you better put that on hold." He said, "Steve's ready to talk to you. So come on over to the apartment and you could sit down with Steve and tell him what you got going and see what he wants to do." So I went over to Playa Vista, where Paige was living at the time, with Steve Austin. And the bottom line is, Steve gave me an open forum, but ultimately, speaking to his agent, they just didn't want to do it. And I think I understand in retrospect. I didn't like it, but I think I understood. The truth is, who was I? Steve Austin was the guy. And if this thing bombed, it was going to look more worse on him than it would have on me. So, matter of fact, I think Barry Bloom was the agent. Well, I know Barry Bloom was the agent. He said, "Sal, if this thing was overseas, we probably said yes immediately." But the truth is that based on just the crowd we had and what we were giving, and quite honestly, the real interesting thing to me is the prices for WrestleReunion, based on what people were getting, were practically a giveaway.
Yeah.
And I was being told I was a crook. I mean, today you could literally show up to an event and get 1 star for the kind of money that you got everything, including tickets to these wrestling shows, QAs, everything for I mean, literally one of these major WWE guys goes to a show. I mean, you're talking about a minute experience. We gave people 3 days worth of stuff.
Yeah.
And I was literally called a crook, and I was ripping people off. And it was crazy. But I will say this, that people that attended WrestleReunion still to this day talk about what a great event it was, how much fun they had. And we do have the WrestleReunion tapes back now. They've been tied up in litigation. So I'm working to try to figure out how to monetize these things and what's going to make sense. I got to do something, right? Not as easy. I think if I had them 10 years ago, maybe WWE might have purchased them. I don't know if they will now or not, but there are numerous ways. So with things like Kickstarter and stuff like that, to figure out what to do with these tapes. It's probably a long play, not a short play, but that's all right. Something's got to be done. I will say this, the WrestleReunion tapes are probably the most requested matches that are on tape that nobody's ever seen. Still to this day, 17 years later, people still come to me and want to know when a DVD's coming out. Well, unfortunately, if DVDs weren't stolen every 2 minutes and crap wasn't uploaded to the internet, I would have gotten with my buddy Michael at High Spots probably and had this thing out on DVD, quite a while ago. And, right now I got to get creative. So, we're going to go to the market with something, because to put all of this into it, and so many of these people are dead. It's crazy. And, quite honestly, the event came off great. A lot of it was through Jimmy Hart. Jimmy Hart was, he was a tough one. He didn't want to do it. I mean, he absolutely refused over and over, would not even really take my phone calls. I guess his wife finally said, "Look, this guy's calling the house every day. You probably better call this guy." So he eventually called me back and refused. And then Lance Russell refused to do it because Jimmy wouldn't do it. And in the meantime, I got Paige just busting my chops, telling me, "You got to get Jimmy Hart on this thing." Right. So we were booked in Memphis. The Fabulous Ones were supposed to work with Corey Macklin against the Rock and Roll Express, Jerry Lawler. So they called me to get Stan to work, because me and Stan Lane, we're good buddies. And I've been blessed that most of the time he's done stuff with me. So, I convinced him, let's go up there. And so now I got Jimmy Hart in the dressing room, just me and him. And I said, "Listen, are you going to do this thing for me or not?" And he said, "No, I'm not." And I said, "Well, why not?" He said, "First of all, I don't believe it's going to happen." He said, "You look at all these guys you're in advertising, you got booked." I said, "Well, they're all coming." And after 10 minutes, he finally said, "I'll do it." I called Lance Russell, told him he'd do it. Lance, of course, didn't believe me, called Jimmy. to see if Jimmy really said he'd do it. He said, no, I told the guy I'll do it. I'll be there. Luckily for me, Jimmy showed up a day or two early at the hotel. And he really started getting this thing wrapped up. Jimmy's amazing, man. He's one of these guys that pretty much can do anything and wants everything to go right. And I learned a lot from him.
Yeah. Jimmy Hart, you say that. I met him. He did a little thing for Mid-States Wrestling. It's out of Harrison, Arkansas. It's about 2 hours from where I'm from here. I went down there just to meet him real quick, and watch the show. But he talked to me and my oldest son for 5 minutes. And I said, well, there's other people online. Oh, no, I got a few minutes, and he just started talking to us and signed a couple things for us. And it was a really nice guy. I didn't realize how old he was because he doesn't look like he's 80 years old.
Oh, sure doesn't.
No, but he's 80 years old and just a fantastic guy. So, yeah, I understand that. So, well, you have an amazing story. You like you said when we talked earlier, you need to write a book.
Where are you from, Brian?
I'm originally from Wisconsin. I was born and raised there, so I watched a lot of the AWA with the Gagnes. Now I live. What's that? I'm sorry.
I said no. I figured that from Wisconsin.
Okay. Now I live in Missouri. I live about hour north of Springfield, Missouri, which is in southwestern Missouri.
Oh yeah, no, I've been to Springfield.
Yeah, so I live in a little town called Goodson, and I retired from the Army about 7 years ago, and fully retired from everything about a year ago. So this is my hobby passion. So, and I love wrestling. We went to WrestleCon in Texas a few months back, which you said you were called a crook. I mean, I paid quite a bit of money to be down there, and it was fun, but some of those autographs and pictures you took were not cheap. I'll just say that.
No, I'm sure they weren't. Now, WrestleCon is the extension of WrestleReunion, right?
Right. Yeah, I figured that. Yeah, but I mean,
we did the WrestleReunion events in 2005. We did the next one. Tampa was the one we started talking about, and various guys came and did things, and Bruno did it, even though he didn't travel in the winter. He came for me, and then we did Valley Forge, which is a tribute to the Zbyszko Sammartino Shea Stadium match, and I wanted things to work out a little bit differently than they did, but Diamond Dallas Page stepped up and took a spot of somebody who refused. Probably not something I want to get into. Okay. But so Page stepped up and did that. We had a good one. Then we had another good match down in Davie, Florida at the Rodeo Arena. About 4 years later, Michael from High Spots came to me and said, why don't we revive this thing? So we just started doing shows in LA, and they were very well received. Probably some mistakes, booking too many, again, even though we didn't have the astronomical numbers, booking too many people at the same time, because again, doesn't matter who it is, it's diminishing return, and these ballrooms are only so big. So, that's a whole other issue. But after we did Toronto or Miami, I don't remember even which one was last, in 2012, I told Michael that, it's time for me to move on. Half the week I regret the decision. The other half I'm thrilled to death I made it. But, I gave him my hotel contacts to continue using and stuff, which has been a big help to him. And he's really got this thing buttoned down now. And the truth is, Michael from High Spots saved the whole first WrestleReunion, because we made promises to people, and through a partner who ended up bailing out of the thing, going to be a disaster. And stepped up and did a lot of stuff. Michael's one of these guys that looks for no fanfare, no nothing. He just built his company up really well, and very likable guy. And we still work together on stuff. Certainly, I consult with him, and if he's got something, he'll call me and so forth. And I'm glad WrestleCon has turned into what it is. But it was me who initially said, I think the whole thing needs to be changed. This needs to go more to a flea market model. If you want to do that, just go ahead. And he, I didn't really offer him the name, and I don't know that he asked for it either. He came up with WrestleCon, and I think that was fine.
No, it was a great event. Don't get me wrong. I enjoyed it. I mean, we stayed at the hotel it was at.
No, look, it's expensive.
But it is expensive, but you know,
they don't set the prices. The talent sets
their agents set the prices.
That's right.
Not them. I even had just to give you an example, Ric Flair was at one, right? That one. We had to wait 2 extra hours, for whatever reason. Okay, I got it. But Ric Flair's agent, when I had him sign that poster behind me, I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, I see it.
He signed it. And I asked him, all I asked him to do was, hey, can you put my first name on there, to Brian? Ric Flair. Agent come up and said, no personalized items. I'm like, I would figure you'd want me to do that so I wouldn't sell it. I never would, but if I wanted to, who's going to buy a poster that says my name on it unless they have the same name? But he's like, no. I was like, all right. So I get it. And those agents were like hawks around all those guys, the big ones. If you ask for something, you know, they looked at them and they said yes or no. And I'm just like, it was a little too much, but I
do understand. The only thing I get from these guys' defense is the wrestling business is interesting, where people don't seem to understand that however much money you bring in, there needs to be a buffer between that amount and what the promoter is going to take home. Mm-hmm. And many times these agents, whatever you want to call them, are subsidizing these events because guys want, you know, if they bring in $10,000, they think they're entitled to 9,500 of it. You know, that's it's kind of tough. Yeah. I mean, there isn't each side looking out for the other. There's one side looking out for themselves, and you know. But then again, there's some guys who do this just so they can hang out with the wrestler for the week. So it's tough. But you know what? Rising tide raises all boats, and if you don't do that, eventually people walk away. So
yeah. No, I get it. It was just a little frustrating at times, but it is what it is. So one more question. I want to talk about your book.
Okay, the book it is.
All right, let's talk about it. How were you able to compile all this information? And I know you said you knew Bruno, but I mean, this book is the autobiography. I mean, you had to get a lot of, I'm sure, people involved with that. How were you able to do that? And how was it the experience for you?
Well, once Bruno and I became friends, we talked often, and you know, for long lengths of time. Mm-hmm. I heard these stories over and over and over. But the one thing that started this ball rolling many years ago, not with this recent book, mm-hmm. Bruno had a deal with these guys that wrote the first book. It turned out to be a financial disaster for Bruno. He never made a dime. Mm. These guys to court, blah, blah, blah. Okay. Now, the one thing that bothered Bruno tremendously, because all the books sold out. They did a run of 10,000, and I think they only sold them in the Pittsburgh area, and they all sold out, which is really not a surprise.
Yeah.
What would happen is when people would see that Bruno was going to make a personal appearance, they would start listing the book for ridiculous amounts of money because you couldn't get it anywhere else.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, you know, I kind of believe that you hear about a problem once, then you start trying to come up with solutions. But unfortunately, you know, I wasn't in a position or didn't even give it too much thought. But eventually I said, Bruno, to be honest with you, I've had enough of this. I said, every time you come back from an appearance, we go through the same thing. I'm going to find out, I'm going to go on eBay, and I'm going to buy a couple of copies of the book. I had never seen it. I had only heard about it. Mm-hmm. So I went out there and bought a couple of copies. I found a company in Raleigh, North Carolina that I could send the book to, and they would scan it into a Word document. I don't remember how much it cost, but whatever it was, we paid it, and that was it. So then I got with a guy named Brian Thompson, who is from somewhere out your way.
Yeah, Lebanon, Missouri. I did an interview with him. Yeah.
Okay. So Brian and was involved with the other guy that had that Memphis sheet. For some reason, his face is staring. You could see it. He had the wrestling, Meltzer type thing that he put out, squared circle or whatever it was. And Brian, I think his name was Brian too. So that's how I met Brian Thompson. Mm-hmm. He edited the book for me because it was a mess. I mean, quite honestly, the original version, all the wrestlers' names were spelled wrong. It was really probably the worst thing that had ever been put out. It was probably the worst thing that have ever been put out by representing Bruno. So Brian did a lot of the editing, cleaned that up. We added a couple of pages to it, and and a few more pictures, and we put that out maybe in 2007, something like that. Well, over time, I would hear Bruno do an interview from time to time. Like I don't listen to my own interviews, and I know what Bruno's going to say. I mean, I hear the stories one-on-one. So, but I was listening to one for whatever reason, I don't know. And I said, Bruno, listen, you were a little bit more open on this interview. He said, eventually he just said, Sal, what am I supposed to do? Yeah. He said, the whole business, what am I supposed to do? Look like a jerk out here? And I said, well, Bruno, if that's the way you feel, then why don't we rewrite the book and tell the real stories? He said, well, do whatever you want. So I would go over stuff with him and send him stuff and, started writing, but it took a long time. We were in no hurry.
Yeah.
Quite in my mind, Bruno was going to outlive us all.
Yeah.
I talked to Davey O'Hannon a lot, who I've become very close to since, and I wish I had really met early. I was at an early show with him in Zabisco, but didn't really get to know him. Bruno would mention his name, fairly often because they got along extremely well. But I just pulled out stuff that I knew was crap, and I put the real stories in, which I had heard I could have dictated them from memory.
Yeah.
Then, I started not getting return calls, so I knew there was a problem. And when we got down to the wake, quite honestly, Carol said, Sal, what about the book? And I said, well, Carol, I got to be honest with you. I stopped working on it. He said, I didn't know what direction we were going in here. I said, well, I think Bruno would like the book finished, don't you? And I said, well, sure, but I didn't really think it was my place to decide that. And that was what we did. And, mutual friend of mine and Jimmy Hart's, Jimmy introduced me to him. And quite honestly, I wish I had listened to Jimmy sooner. A guy named Colin Bowman used to be WCW Magazine. Mm-hmm. Colin's a brilliant mind, great for business. We got him involved in all the later WrestleReunion events. And I called Jimmy one day and I said, Jimmy, I finally found the right guy to edit the book. And he says, really? Who's it going to be? And I said, Jimmy, seriously, you need me to tell you who it's going to? He said, oh, Colin. And I said, yeah. He said, yeah, you know what? Perfect choice. So without Colin Bowman, I mean, the book, we've gotten a lot of compliments on the book.
Yeah.
And, 5-star reviews on Amazon for most people. And, I really appreciated that. Amazon reviews always help. Mm-hmm. But Colin, it became a passion for him too. I just don't think it would have turned out the same. The book is very large, costs 568 pages, which is a lot for a book. And truth is, we could have went to 1,000, but at some point, he said, "You better stop." He said, "I think enough is enough." Yeah. And then it chose to do it in color. Once I found out from Amazon that if one page is in color, 568 pages are in color, and we wanted color pictures in there. So the color version, I mean, it's expensive because it's expensive to print.
Right. Yeah.
Because the book is so big. But the truth is, nobody who's bought the color version has regretted it because the picture kind of like, I think half or more of the pictures are in color. And, that's really cool.
Yeah.
But that was the thing with the book. I'm sorry that, it didn't come out before Bruno had passed because we do some stuff but it just obviously, just want to make God laugh, let him know what your plans are, right?
That's right. Yeah. I'm going to put that in the description below for people to get the book if they want to. I'm going to buy a book here. I've been reading so many books here lately. I'm trying to catch up on those wrestling books.
I'll tell you one of the interesting things about wrestling fans. Somebody told me when I put the new book up to take the old book down. And I said, why? It doesn't cost me anything to have it up. What if somebody wants it?
Yeah.
Still sell 2, 3, 4 books of the old book. It's like people want the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I'm like, great. I mean, again, if I was paying rent to have it up there, maybe I would have made a different choice. But several years later, and we're still selling the old book too. Yeah. Even though this one has way more pages, way more pictures. Yeah. Of course, the other one is cheaper, but because it is much smaller. Yeah. But it's interesting. Maybe people want to compare the changes from the first book to the second book, which there are many because, like I said the stories, but there were so many more stories to tell. And Bruno was a great guy. People ask me all the time, which you didn't. You're one of the first people not to ask me. But, why you? Why did Bruno pick you? I don't have the slightest idea.
That was going to be my next question, but you did it for me.
Yeah, I mean, I get asked it all the time. The only thing I know is that I know he trusted me.
Yeah.
With Bruno, that goes a long way. But I don't have an answer to it. But I think his record speaks for itself, and who he was and how he drew, and everybody has their opinions. But, the truth of the matter is this: when you talk about Bruno Sammartino and the book, it's a book about a man that was a wrestler, but, what he went through in his early life, how they even came to this country, things went for this country, the kind of stand-up guy he was, the things that, he did for people, coming over here as a weakling and all of that. And you think about the amazing ride and what he went through, what his mother went through. His mother was his hero and so forth. But when it comes down to his place in the business, I don't know how you question it. He's the only guy in the business who ever demanded they take the belt away from him. Twice.
Twice.
And it took them a year to do that.
Yeah.
When he went on cards all over the world, he went as the main event. Now, many guys will tell you the McMahons brought him into New York. But if you weren't a guy like Dusty Rhodes or Mil Mascaras, if you were just a guy who was on top of another territory, when you came to New York, you were in the opening match or the second match or something like that.
Yeah.
New York guy. Bruno was always the headliner somewhere else. Mm-hmm. And you saw Bruno's cards having some special guest bonus attraction to help draw because Bruno was enough.
Yeah.
You could just lay out all these scenarios and circumstances and the argument that anybody else did better. And let's face it, what promoter ever took a belt off of somebody because they were drawing too much money? That's never happened.
Yeah, no.
Right? So, you can make Bruno could have been the one thing Bruno did say when he was kind of forced into his comeback, the rings had changed. And he said, when I got in the back, I said to the guys, I said, are you guys kidding with this? This is like a trampoline out there. And he said, if I was wrestling on this my whole career, he said, I would have had the championship for 20 years. Because these guys were, the Brunos, the Koloffs, the Kowalskis, these guys are taking bumps on boxing rings.
Yeah.
How much could your body take of that crap?
Yeah, true. Very true. So, Sal, I want to thank you for coming on today. I really, really appreciate it. You gave us a lot of insight. And, I reached out to you a few weeks back and you accepted right away. And we have a mutual friend, Greg Gagne, great guy. And I have a lot of respect for Bruno. Always have. I never met the guy, but I've never heard a bad thing about the guy ever.
Well, that's right. And I'm sorry I didn't. We do have a mutual friend in Greg Gagne, and I will tell you one of the smoothest matches I was ever in. Again in the Denver Auditorium, Greg Gagne against Kurt Hennig.
Yeah.
Working with Greg, he was a guy obviously could have used. Some guys needed Putski needed some inches. Another 20 pounds on Greg Gagne with his working ability. Who knows what that might have.
I agree. Yeah.
Meant. The only thing I forgot to mention before you go is the whole WrestleReunion thing really started to come loose a few weeks beforehand. If it wasn't for this Anthony Attanasio that I told you about that got started, it was really him that stepped up and saved WrestleReunion. And, he's a guy that nobody knows, but for all the fans who were there that loved it, that still tell stories about it, that want to see the matches, without Anthony, there's a good chance they would have had a different look to it.
Yeah.
Or I would have had to make some other arrangements real quick, because unfortunately, when you take the word of some people who are not stand-up people, it can get ugly very quick.
Yeah.
But I certainly learned my lesson. But he's as huge an influence in me in the wrestling business as some of these other guys.
Yeah.
He helped open the door, and then he kept the door open when it could have been slammed in my face.
Yeah.
So all of that is appreciated. I appreciate your time today.
I appreciate you coming on here today. I know you're a busy man and you probably got a lot of things going on, and taking time out of your schedule. I appreciate it very much. And ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Sal Corrente, the Big Cheese.
Now you said it wrong.
Oh,
You said it right the first time.
I didn't say it right. I'm sorry.
No, it's Sal Corrente.
Sal Corrente.
Like the E might be silent. I don't know, however you want to say it, but it's not an sound at the
It's
end.
not an A. Sal Corrente.
There you
Okay.
go. Now you got it.
I apologize. Okay.
No worries. You have a great day. Hopefully your audience enjoys
All right.
some of these stories
yeah.
that are probably older than they are.
Well, you know what? I'm going to look for those. Hopefully you'll get that video situation resolved and we can see those someday soon. So I'm hoping.
Yeah, well, those matches, believe me, there was some real. I don't know if you ever saw the WrestleReunion lineups. There's a thing on Wikipedia gives the lineups of the first three.
Okay.
Some really great matches there. I mean, they're really.
Oh, I'm sure.
So hopefully, yes. And when I say nobody's seen them, that means including me.
Well, yeah, that's not good.
Yeah.
Then. Yeah, we need to see him definitely.
Yeah, for sure. So you have a great day. And
all right, you too, Sal. Thanks, and
taking the
people
time.
out there. Thanks for watching. If you're listening, thank you, and please subscribe. We'll talk to you soon.